Hi there, hello, and welcome to my mini classroom. If you're new here, welcome. My name's Jen. I'm a primary school teacher from the UK, and I now support parents at home with their children's learning. So if your children are in school and you're following the national curriculum, or you're choosing to home educate, I essentially support you with your child's education, and more specifically with reading. That's what I'm really passionate about. I am a phonics and literacy specialist with a lot of experience with dyslexia and other things like that as well. So if you want to support your child with reading, if you're interested in finding out more about how to support your child with reading and loads of other general topics around teaching your child, supporting your child at home, and any questions that you have, please follow along. Maybe consider hitting the subscribe button or just stick around to the end of the video. That would be great too. If you're not new, welcome back. Thank you for choosing to watch another video of mine. Today we are going to be talking about when should I start teaching my child to read. Now this is a question that I get asked so much, and I can understand why it will be a really, really big topic to talk about. There is so much pressure put on parents at the moment. You're constantly bombarded with seeing, oh, my child started reading at 2, my child's a fluent reader and they're only 6 months old, and all of those things. It can be really overwhelming, particularly if you're following all that Instagram lifestyle, and I do 16 hours of work with my child a day and it's so lovely. It's not realistic, let's be real. If you, like me, have seen all of this and it's really sort of confusing and stressful and all of that, no problem. That's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about the UK system, the UK reading system, and when I would recommend starting to teach your child to read. If you choose to start a bit earlier, if your child is really interested and engaged with reading, absolutely follow their interests. Following your child's interests is one of the best things you can do, but we're going to go through some basic structures, some basic ages and stages of what you can do at different ages to help your child start learning to read. So to start off with, we're going to talk about baby books. Now, you can actually introduce your child to books a lot earlier than a lot of people think. And baby books are one of the best ways to do this. These are fantastic because they are high contrast. Your child can see them from a very early age. So having a few high contrast books like this around is really useful. It's your child's first introduction to books. We are not expecting them to read any words or anything like that, but it can get them used to looking at the pages and exploring books in general. As your child gets older, having board books like this are really useful because you can build up their fine motor skill, getting them to grab and turn the pages. They are big, chunky pages. They're not going to get broken. They're not going to get damaged. So it's a great way to introduce your child to books, to build that fine motor skills, which is the muscles in your fingers. The other thing you can do from a very, very early age, probably earlier than many people think, is read your child stories. Reading stories to your child, even before they are at an age where they start speaking, is a great way to expose your child to new vocabulary, just to words in general, to get them listening to additional words, which will help them with their speech. The more that they hear language and vocabulary and words, the more they will take it in and the more they will try to mimic it. So reading to your child from a very early age is incredibly useful. And I highly recommend continuing to read to your child all the way through for as long as they will let you. I know some 14-year-olds who are still getting a bedtime story at least once a week, which is a fantastic way of exposing your child to books that are of a higher level that maybe they can't read themselves. And also it's just a great bit of bonding time, so would highly recommend that. But ultimately, yes, you can start reading to your child from a much earlier age than you might think, and it will do your child so much good. So now we've got the very basics out of the way, we can start talking about actually teaching our children to read. When should we do it? What should we do to do that? How can we support them, etc., etc. Now, the first and incredibly important part of learning to read that so many people skip over because they just don't know about it is blending skills. The scientific term for this is phonemic awareness. It's literally your child's ability to listen and manipulate sound. This is something that so many people skip over, and it's no one's fault that they do so. If you don't know about it, how are you meant to teach it? But if your child misses phonemic awareness, they will really struggle with reading later on. In fact, even in year 1, which is what I teach, where my heart is, I am constantly supporting children with phonemic awareness and helping them develop their blending skills. Because in year 1, they might hit a roadblock, which is adjacent consonants, which I'll talk about eventually, but they hit this roadblock of adjacent consonants where they might have been able to blend 2 sounds or 3 sounds together, but they start hitting those 4 sounds, those really tricky bull sounds. And if they don't have strong phonemic awareness, they will struggle. As a teacher, I spend a lot of time in year 1 building up this phonemic awareness. As you've probably gleaned, because I can do it in year 1 means that you can do it at any time. If your child is a bit older and you haven't done any phonemic awareness work with them, or you notice that they're really struggling with blending, that doesn't mean that they are going to be bad at reading. It doesn't mean that you are too late or you haven't done enough. because you can start building that up at any time. And I actually have a set of activities and games that you can play that will build up blending skills and phonemic awareness. I've attached it in the link down below, so feel free to go and grab that. But you can start building phonemic awareness from a much younger age than most people think. Even doing things like singing nursery rhymes to your child from an early age will help them recognise rhyming patterns, alliteration patterns, all of which is helping them identify smaller units of sounds within words, which will then be really useful when they start to blend words together and read them within books. So when it comes to teaching young children to read, before we start learning letters, before we start doing all of that knowledge-based stuff, we want to be building the skill of being able to put sounds together and manipulate them to form words in order to ensure that when our children reach that next level, it's easy. And when can we start this? Very, very early. Start at 1.5 with nursery rhymes. Great. Build up that recognition of rhyming, that recognition of alliteration, the sounds within words. Fantastic. As your child gets older, you can start sounding out words for them to blend, like, let's go to bed. By doing that, you've sounded out the word, and then you've put it together so that your child is able to take that into their brain, hear it, manipulate it, and understand that that's how sounds are put together to form words. And ideally, this is something that we want to be doing over a long period of time. So we can start it very early, but we can absolutely keep doing it a long way into the future. But what about learning letters? Now, when most people think about learning to read, learning letters is what they first think of. When we are reading, we are looking at words and letters on the page. It's very understandable that people think that's the core of reading rather than the phonemic awareness, which I've already talked about, and it's so much more important. But when should we start teaching our children letters? When should they start learning letters in order to do that next step of reading? And the first thing I'll say is this is a really irritating thing. I know it's really irritating, but it is different for every child. If you have a child who is showing interest in letters, absolutely go with that interest. Point out letters everywhere. Tell them what sound each letter makes. That's fantastic. Equally, if you have a child who is not interested in letters at all, that's fine too. We can start to incorporate letters into whatever they're playing with and going with their interests. So for example, I have some children in my classroom who absolutely love the cars and the construction. So what do? I put letters on the cars. It's as simple as that. I'm starting to incorporate letters and language into their play. And when I sit next to them and I play with them, I do very basic things like, oh, here's a block. Oh, the block has a word on it. It says up. I've modelled how I'm reading it. I'm just reading it. I'm playing alongside. I'm not telling them they have to sit down and do some reading, but they are starting to pick it up around the play that we're doing. And as kids experience books more, as we read to them more, as we show them how much we love reading and how much we value reading, children become more keen to read anyway, whether that's through reading leaflets as they're playing in construction, or whether that's them picking up books from their bookshelf and reading things as they walk down the street. So when do we actually start teaching letters? In the UK, we tend to start teaching letters around 4.5. You can start teaching letters a bit earlier. If you have a 3-year-old, you could absolutely start introducing them to the letters within their name, getting them to sound out the letters within their name, for example, recognise them, spot them out and about, put them in a puzzle and re-sort them. That's all fantastic. Equally, if you want them to start learning letters, if you want to start practicing letters, you can start doing that from around 2.5, 3, not a problem at all. I would recommend doing maybe 1 sound a week if you are choosing to do this with a younger child. You want to solidify that letter, solidify the sound it makes and the shape that it has before you move on to the next sounds. If you are following the national curriculum, if you are working with a child who's in reception, as I say, we start to do sounds around about 4, around about 5, in between that time. At this point, I would suggest doing maybe 2 sounds a week. So do the first 2 days on 1 sound, the next 2 days on the next sound, and then consolidate on Friday. That's how I tend to run my phonics lessons and how even in year 1, I teach new sounds. I would also suggest if you are starting to teach your child to read, start with SATPIN. So that is the sounds SAT, or SATPIN. The reason we start with these rather than the alphabet is because your child will be able to read far more words far more quickly. If we start with A, B, C, D, there aren't that many words that your child can read. Whereas if you start with SAT, there's loads and loads of words that they can start reading, which builds that confidence, builds that stamina for reading and that excitement in reading, because they are suddenly able to use that knowledge very, very quickly, put it into practice and get a result from it, which is ultimately what we want. We want our kids to love reading. We want them to be confident in it and excited to learn the next step. So there we have my tips on when to start your child reading and how to do so. First off, those baby books, they're fantastic. Start them very early. Get your child turning the pages, get them experiencing the book, feeling the book, all of that, fantastic. Let your child experience and play with it. Equally, start reading to your child as early as you can. Get them experiencing that language, looking at the page, looking at the letters, looking at the pictures, turning the pages. All of that is helping your child experience books, experience reading, take more in and find it more engaging and exciting too, which is more likely to help them want to learn to read. Then we want to be building your child's phonemic awareness skills, those blending skills, so that your child can listen to those sounds, hear the sounds, play with sounds, which will help so much, not just with blending sounds together when they are actually reading words, but also with segmenting for writing, so breaking words down. Like if you have the word cat, you have to break it down into cat in order to write it and then know what the letters are. Having your phonemic awareness and starting to build that from an early age is fantastic. And as I say, if you want some activities to use with your child to work on with that, click the link in down below to find that. Then we're talking about when should we start teaching letters to our child. While I will never discourage anyone from going with their child's interests, don't feel that pressure to start really, really early. You do not need to. Most children in the UK will start learning letters around about 4.5 years old. If your child is a bit later than that, don't worry. You can absolutely carry on. You can work on that with them. If your child is showing interest earlier, great. But I will say, don't feel like you have to be incredibly pressured by this. If your child is 3 years old and they want to learn letters, great. You can start them. You can start learning one sound a week and getting your child to recognize the shape and make the sound to match it. Fantastic. And then each week, as your child becomes confident with the previous sound, you can add a new one in. If your child is 4.5 and they're a little bit more grown up and they're showing that interest in letters, or you want to follow what the national curriculum is doing, you can start teaching 2 sounds a week. I wouldn't recommend doing more than that because it can be difficult for them to remember all of those sounds, which then ends up them just getting confused with everything. We want them to be confident. We want them to be sure of what those letters are so that when they come to use that phonemic awareness, that blending, it's easy for them. And they get that amazing thrill of being like, I just read that. I'm able to read. This is brilliant. And I'm really good at it. Because ultimately, we want our kids to be confident readers, not just good readers. And then the final thing I mentioned was when we start teaching kids to read, we want to start with SATPIN, SATPIN, rather than the alphabet. This just means that our kids can read more quickly. They end up being more confident. We end up getting to see them make progress very, very quickly. That's all from me today. If you have any questions or any comments, please do leave them below. If you've made it to this point in the video, please hit the like button. It really helps me to reach other people and makes the YouTube algorithm happy. Equally, if you feel like subscribing, if you want more of this content, that would be great. Let me know in the comments how you feel about what I've said today. Are you someone who has a child who's really, really keen to read and you've been following their interests and teaching them letters as you walk down the street? Are you following along with what the school's doing? Or are you just watching this for fun and interested in what I'm saying? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to chat to you. I'd love to answer any questions that you have. As I say, feel free to grab the free activities. Thank you so much for watching to the end, and I hope to see you very soon.